Vote Rejoin EU.
Vote Rejoin EU.
I'm Brendan Donnelly. I'm the leader of the Rejoin EU party, and I'm going to be leading a discussion with two of my colleagues from within the party who are going to introduce themselves now. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm John Falk. I'm the North of England coordinator for the party.
Gemma, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Gemma, and I take care of TikTok.
I'm very well too, and a very good coordinator John is. One of the great events we're looking forward to in the party is the National Rejoin March, which is going to take place on the 23rd of September. We'll be there, and we'll be encouraging all our friends and supporters to be there as well. Gemma, what do you think the significance of such a march is? Is it going to make any difference? Does it have any importance beyond the symbolic importance of being an opportunity for people to say Brexit isn't working, something ought to be done about it?
Well, it brings everybody together. I think there's a lot of power when you gather that amount of people in one space. Everybody is like-minded. There's a lot of buzz around it. I recently posted advertising around it, and yeah, it seems to be getting a lot of attention. So I think there's a lot of merit for, gathering like-minded people in the same spot, sharing ideas, showing the world that we mean business. But yeah, I think it'd be great.
John, you've been very much involved in the administrative organisation, I know. What do you hope will be the upshot of it?
Oh, I have, yes, and I've been on marches for the last 7 years, mate. So it's hardly a novelty to me. I was involved in the first march, which was in October, delayed because obviously the Queen died. So we had, but yes, this year is going to be absolutely amazing. Last year we budgeted for about 10,000 people. We got 50,000. If we budget for 100,000 this year, that's 500,000. Ding dong. Yeah. We've got personalities coming along. There's a whole row of people who are starting to pop out the woodwork now. We've got the public behind us. They're around a 60% mark of people who want to rejoin. It's done. We've just got to tell these people in Westminster. We've got to tell Labour. We've got to get the Tories to turn around, ditch their, current leadership, and actually become the Tory party again. We've got to get the Lib Dems to turn around, who are terrified of the press. I mean, it's crazy. How can we have a country that's terrified of its press? It's what?
Well, why do you think they are terrified of the press? It's all very well to point to opinion polls and say 60% or 65% of people have a particular view, but why hasn't it found a political echo yet? Why aren't there political parties meeting this gap in the market?
I will tell you exactly why. Beer and sandwiches. Do you remember?
Yes, I do.
Murdoch decided that the EU was a bad thing because when he went to Downing Street and spoke to the Prime Minister stood to attention and said, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir. He went to the EU and they said, you are who? They didn't even know his name. He didn't register because he was in one little country of a massive union. And he decided on that day that he hated the EU because he couldn't control it. And let's be very, very clear. You have 4 people that are in charge of the UK. These are the 4 big press barons. They tell the politicians what to do, because if they give them bad press, they lose.
Do you agree?
They're in charge.
Do you agree with that, Gemma? It's the power of the press, really, which is calling the shots in this country on Europe and perhaps on many other issues.
To a certain degree, yes. I do think a lot of people are waking up now to their ways and how they can spin things. And, there's a lot of talk about not believing mainstream media, and influencers on TikTok and YouTube, I think, are becoming much more prominent and more trusted. So it's not solely in their court. Maybe it was, but I think people are becoming wise to their ways now and take the news stories with a pinch of salt. I mean, it doesn't help. Don't get me wrong. They have a lot of sway, but as we push forward, I've seen a lot of differences in how people engaged with news 10 years ago to how they engage with it now.
The Labour Party, up till now, has been rather resistant, or perhaps it's better to say that Starmer has been very resistant to the definite shift in public opinion on Europe. Do you think, Gemma, that will continue until the next general election, or will there be, even over the next year, some evolution in the Labour Party's position?
I struggle with their position because it changes all the time. It's focus group politics, and I wish sometimes they'd grow a bit more of a backbone and say what they think. But I understand that they're trying to appeal to the middle ground people that may have swayed one way last time. They're trying to not scare them off to sway too far to the left this time. I understand that. I'm hopeful that things will change if they do win, but there's no guarantees. So we'll see.
John, isn't it a slightly odd kind of comment on British politics that people like Gemma, lots of people, are hopeful about the Labour Party because they think it will do something different in government from what it's saying at the moment? It's a very odd basis on which to construct your optimism about the future, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly. And this is why we in the Rejoin EU party are very much keen on a hung parliament. We desperately need this as a country because we need to take the power away from the two dinosaur parties that have been appropriating everybody's votes. Because if you vote for something else, they say it's a wasted vote. No vote's ever wasted. It's not a wasted vote. It's an expression of opinion. And hopefully, if there's enough of you that vote the same way, you get your way. But what we've got to remember is there's a tiny proportion of the parliamentary seats in the UK that actually matter because they change hands. The vast majority of seats don't matter, and the huge majority of votes don't matter at all. Because if 30% of people vote for one party and they get the largest share of the vote, they get all the power in that constituency. It's almost feudal. So we've got to address this. The other piece is European Union membership. That's the two things, PR and European Union membership. We fix those two things, we're heading down the right track to getting the country back together again, politically, socially, economically, etc.
The Labour Party's most recent policy statement is very evasive on the subject of PR. It criticises the first past the post system in a way that you and I would find very, very attractive. But then there's some weasel wording, some very obvious weasel wording about saying there's no consensus about what should replace it. And then they say any change should come from the bottom up, not be imposed, which is an excuse, of course, for the Labour leadership to say and think nothing about any change in the electoral system for quite a time to come. Gemma, do you see any possibility within the present system of that changing?
No.
Well, that's a very blunt, straightforward answer.
I think they're both too keen on keeping whoever's in power. They would be too keen on keeping control of it, so they're not incentivized to change anything.
I remember when the Conservatives were out of power for so long under the Blair and Brown government, there were even some Conservatives who began to flirt with the idea of a reform in the electoral system. What happens is that when one of the parties gets into power, having had their doubts about the first past the post system until then, they suddenly discover, well, actually, it's not such a bad system after all. If it gives us the governmental power and we can enjoy it for the next 3 or 4 years and perhaps 8 or 12 years, and it's not so bad after all. It is rather depressing as an analysis. But it's an analysis, I'm afraid, which has been rather confirmed in the past week or so by the truly extraordinary events surrounding Nigel Farage and his banking arrangements. Gemma, what have you made of that?
I try and stay away from looking at him in the news, to be honest. I'm not it just it's a distraction away from the things that are really important. I don't care about his bank account completely. I would rather, people focused on the real things that are happening rather than whether Can I be derogatory about him?
Of course, of course, of course. Just as long as it's not libelous or slanderous or whatever it is.
I think it's probably harping back to the flow of the press. It's using that and splashing that everywhere so that they don't focus on the fact that people's mortgages have doubled and the important things are affecting day-to-day lives. It doesn't impact me whatsoever whether Nigel Farage banks at Coutts or whether he banks at NatWest or wherever he banks. But yeah, I think karma hits hard is all I've got to say.
Good. John, do you think there might be something a bit more sinister? Chairman raised the possibility of a deliberate diversion. Do you think that's possible, or is there another explanation?
A good day to bury bad news. Yes, that's where it started, all this. Now, the machine within government to create these little things that distract the public when there isn't a big football match going on or some other circuses and Parlement circenses, as the Romans used to say, to keep the crowds occupied. That's one side. The more sinister bit to me is how come a private individual who has never been elected into office except as an MEP.
Well, I think that's a rather high honour myself. But
sure. But within the UK, in a body representing within the UK, he has never held a post on a council or anywhere.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reason for that. It's his politics. Why have MPs come out and started commenting on someone's private bank account? It's not a party bank account, it's his private bank account. Happens to be with Coutts because he's a big city millionaire, not a man of the people. He is part of the elite, not us. Why are they commenting on this? Why did then, and even worse, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor come out expressing opinions on a private person's bank account, and someone, the CEO of NatWest, has lost her job over it, but they haven't released officially why Nigel Farage lost his bank account. There are a variety of reasons where he could have lost his bank account. Suspected fraud and misdealings with money hidden away in tax havens and not declaring it and all that sort of stuff is one possibility. Another one is that he goes below, is it 2 million quid that he has to have with Coutts, either in a mortgage or in savings, etc., investments, to remain a customer of theirs. If he had a mortgage with them and he's paid it off by using his savings, he goes below the 2 million, bing bong, he's out. And a variety of other reasons relating to bringing the bank into disrepute by the bank being known as his banker.
Yeah.
Why is the government interfering?
Well, I agree is a quite extraordinary aspect of it. But I would say that I don't think that the CEO handled it as well as she might have done.
No, agreed.
I think that when you're saying, which is the basis of the reason why they didn't want to hang on to him, as I understand it, that they have reputational doubts about him.
Yes.
It's quite difficult to say that's simply a commercial decision. Of course, at one level, it is a commercial decision, but it's a commercial decision that tends a bit more towards the evaluative and the political than
reputational from what, Brendan? Reputational from what? Either reputation because of his politics, or reputational because he is such a well-known figure in the UK who may have involved Coutts in something that was fraudulent.
Well,
we don't know. We don't know what the reputational thing was. That's the issue. And we're never going to find out because statute of secrecy on bank account details and stuff like that.
I think there's something even more sinister about all this, which is the way in which the Conservative Party has now shown itself to be a wholly owned subsidiary of a rather nasty kind of right-wing populism, which is incorporated by Farage. See, the Conservative Party of which I was a member, you weren't, other people don't approve of the Conservative Party, but it always had two things that, as it were, acted as a restraint on it. One was the respect for institutions, monarchy, Church of England, whatever you like to call it, tradition, if you like, and business and banking, if you will. Seems an odd thing to say, perhaps, that banking is a healthy constraint to have on the Conservative Party, but I do think it did perform a moderating function, yes, which now the Conservative Party is moving away from. The Conservative Party doesn't hesitate to say, we are on the side of the little man against banks. We are on the side of the little man against business. And Brexit, of course, summarized all that. It was a profoundly anti-business decision. And the Conservative Party, in order to justify Brexit, has had to move away from its traditional economic anchors. It's moved away from its institutional anchors. And when that happens, there's not much left between the Conservative Party and something really rather nasty. Gemma, have you ever voted Conservative?
No.
Well, no. Has your view of the Conservative Party shifted over the past 10 years?
I will say, though, that I look back at old videos of speeches made by previous ministers, prime ministers, etc., and the caliber. I don't have to like people, but I can respect them. Like, I don't share their values or their points of view, perhaps, but they make good arguments for them. And they are knowledgeable, respectful, etc. That seems to have diminished over time, and it's more kind of cheap, easy wins now versus solid foundations that it used to perhaps be built on. So the likes of people used to say that he was grey and bland, but John Major, for example, you compare him to listening to Tory ministers speak now, and it's like chalk and cheese. It's vastly different. So I think there's been a huge shift in their mentality, and I don't know where that necessarily. Maybe it was Boris Johnson. I don't know where that made a sizable shift, and I don't know how they get back there, because I think that is also stemming from like that. A lot of their loss of confidence from their historical voters stems from that. They used to be seen as the kind of safe and stable, party, and they would take care of things and conserve. But now it just feels like a roller coaster.
John, has your view of the Conservative Party shifted?
Yes, it has. It has. I mean, Gemma, you may not, being a youngster. Brandon and I certainly will remember Alan Bastard.
Yes, if you help me, I'll get you one of those new Ocelot supercats. Really? Do you promise? No. But I promise that if you don't help me, I won't get you one.
An absolutely horrible extreme Tory under Thatcher. It was obviously portrayed as a comedy. That's one aspect, which is the totally selfish, money-grubbing, city-obsessed, selfish person.
Well, William Rees-Mogg said the other day that we need more babies in this country because the population is going down. It's one of the few political acts that he can claim to be a leader on. He has indeed made a contribution to increasing the population of this country. So he's at least consistent and sincere about that.
So that's why you favoured Boris Johnson, was it?
I never Boris Johnson. But you make the point, it seems to me, that it is quite important in the context of the Rejoin EU party. There is such an estrangement from the Conservative Party that people tend to accept, I think uncritically, but I can understand why they accept the that the most important thing in this next election is to get rid of the Conservative Party. And warts and all, the Labour Party in most places, the Liberal Democrats in some places, but in most places, it's the Labour Party that is the most efficient instrument of getting rid of the Conservatives. Gemma, is that a political attitude that you're familiar with? I suppose it must be.
Yes, I see comments like that all the time. Yeah, it's well, yes, in the most part, it's Tories out at whatever it takes. That's the number one goal. Whatever follows, what will be will be. We'll deal with that when it comes. Kind of attitude. I see that a lot on across social media. I do believe that there are some good ministers within Labour, but I think their current structure of their leadership is doing them no favors. But yes, that there leaves a lot of question marks where there should be certain. There should be definite answers rather than this kind of flip-flop campaign, and like at the moment we believe this and then 6 months later we believe this. And they say that it's about having a leader that's dynamic and can be things can change, and therefore their policy needs to change. But I think it's more than that. I think they're just trying to appeal to everybody all at once rather than pick a platform and really kind of stand by it.
Last question to both of you. John, what do you think when do you think the next election is going to be, and what's the result going to be? Not much.
I am very much hopeful that the election is as late as possible, Brendan. I'm hopeful it's around November next year, which seems to be where the Tories are now. Last week they were talking about May, but they're moving it on. We have quite a few MPs in the House of Commons, like, for example, Nadine Dorries, who either turn up or don't even bother to turn up and don't do anything. They just sit there, braying, for want of a better description. I think we're at a point now where the whole Westminster system is dysfunctional, where you have comments by our current Prime Minister, granted it was last year, that British is just an acronym for English. Can you imagine the effect that has in certain communities in Northern Ireland, all over Scotland, all over Wales? How can we have such a person as Prime Minister, someone who has never excelled at anything in government, has risen simply by financial influence, by being in the right place at the right time? In any normal country, this guy would not be in power.
The result, what's the result going to be, though, in your view?
Result is very hopefully is going to be a hung parliament. And I think we should give Keir Starmer membership of the Rejoin EU party for the work he's doing on our behalf to put people off from voting Labour, and thus ending up with a hung parliament.
You agree with that, Gemma?
I do. I think there might be opportunity for them to pip a minority, like a small majority, but I don't think it will be anything spectacular. And I think it will be kind of, I want to say, I think that they're trying to identify when it will be the best time for them, but I don't think any time is a good time for them. So I think I go with October.
Yeah, I found rather implausible the reports that Sunak was thinking about going in January or February because the disaster then will be less than it would be 6 months later. No politician believes that they should choose a disaster now in order to avoid one in the future. They think, and I don't think it's just money. I think that they think that events will turn in their direction because they deserve to win the election, and somehow fate will intervene in order to allow them to do so. So I think they'll carry on as long as possible. And I incline to the view, not what I want, but I incline to the view that it will be a very substantial Labour majority. But one shouldn't make predictions, particularly about the future. We'll see what happens. Those who live longest will know most. Thank you very much, Gemma. Thank you very much, John. I think we'll wrap it up there.
Embark on a majestic journey with the Rejoin EU party and support our cause on Patreon. Be part of the movement.
Vote Rejoin EU. Join the EU vision.